This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
He swam Alcatraz in San Francisco on his own.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In Speedos and goggles. You know, he loved ocean, the water and swimming. But then I remember one of our last holidays, we went up to Noosa. I went in for a swim and he ran after me and he got to the water's edge and absolutely had a meltdown 5 years ago. He'd be the one dragging me out, going, come on, let's go.
Welcome to She Wasn't Born Yesterday, the pod that fearlessly chats about all things affecting us ladies who are 40 plus fabulous.
Well, and the guys that want to know what we think.
Well, them too. I'm Janet Evans, advertising creative.
And I'm Jenny Woodhouse, semi-retired social worker.
In other words, you're busier than ever. We're J&J and we're super thrilled you're with us for She Wasn't Born Yesterday. Gorgeous. Well, if you were in the ad world in the late 80s and 90s, which I know you weren't.
I wasn't.
But I was.
But you were.
But I was.
I know you were.
Everyone, me included, knew of a writer called Craig Moore.
No.
Or, as he was, well, hopefully affectionately known, Moose.
Moose. How did he get that name?
Well, I don't really know. I think we're going to find out in this episode, but he was teamed up with an art director called Rocky. So there might have been a Rocky and Bullwinkle kind of situation going on there.
Could have been too, yeah.
Maybe
okay.
not. I don't know. Or maybe it was the chocolate mousse. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
But even if you didn't know him personally, you certainly knew of him because he was a multi-award winner. It was really, really annoying how many awards he had. And he was a generous mentor of rising creatives. And above all, he was a larger-than-life character. However, he did pass away in September last year from early-onset dementia, aged just 56. It had rocked the advertising world and obviously had a huge ripple effect beyond that. And today we're chatting to his 40-plus fabulous other half. She is the amazing Louise Bryant, who has set up an incredible initiative to challenge perceptions of dementia and encourage early intervention, which is astonishing so soon after such a devastating event.
Indeed it is.
Louise, welcome to She Wasn't Born Yesterday.
Welcome, Louise.
Thank you for having me today.
And gorgeous, you know, I'm going to go completely off script here. You know, I know we've sent you all these questions and everything, but our first question is, how are you?
I'm okay. I think today is a bit of a hard day. But generally, yes, you know, you kind of, grief hits you in the most, different sort of ways. But no, all good with wonderful memories of Moose.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty fresh and live. For years, you've been the managing editor for some of Australia's most prestigious and luxe publications, all the ones we aspire to, but, you know, can never actually attain. And you're currently managing editor of News Corp Australia's Prestige and Conde Nast titles. Is that how you say it?
That's right, yes. So we work in the publishing space and so I'm very fortunate. I work with some wonderful colleagues. I've always worked in media and it's an area that I thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah, it's certainly a live wire at the moment, isn't it? The media.
That's right.
But it always is.
But so that's a really, it's a really hectic job, and not to mention juggling family life as well. 10 years ago, your beloved Moose started showing some signs that perhaps all wasn't well. What were those first signs that you saw then?
Well, actually, Moose had a hip operation. He wasn't in great health going into surgery. And certainly there were things that were strange things were sort of happening, I suppose, but nothing, you know, that meant that there'd be any concern that he may have dementia. But ultimately he suffered quite severe post-operative delirium and subsequently was diagnosed in the course of the doctors reviewing his symptoms and they determined that he had young onset dementia. Which at the time was not so much a shock, but it was just more perhaps it explained a lot about some of his behaviours. But of course, being so young, there wasn't a lot of, I think people were in disbelief. I think there was a lot of confusion and certainly from a health system point of view, we were kind of left to our own devices because he wasn't over the age of 65 plus, which is ordinarily when those sort of dementia supports kick in. Yes, and then I guess for a period of time, you know, Moose sort of plateaued And we had a great life. Everything was sort of a new normal, if you like. We were still able to do things. Moose was by and large quite independent, but he wasn't really able to work. And for probably about 5 or 6 years, we kind of just muddled along as best we could without sort of thinking too much about the future, but knowing that all was not what it seems, looking back on it now.
So what was this delirium? How does that sort of present itself?
Well, it's very neurological, obviously. There's a lot of confusion. Moose was more confused than normal. He was in hospital for 6 weeks while they kind of were, in essence, scrambling to understand what was causing this sort of after effect from the operation. And, if you knew Moose, you'd know that he's somebody who he's just full of life and he doesn't sit still for very long. So this was a sort of, trying to manage some of his behaviours, but also making sure, it's quite a serious issue that can occur after surgery, of course. But in Moose's case, there was something much more sinister underlying. It was extraordinary because he, after a period of time, he somewhat, recovered in the sense that he, was able to function again. At one point, the doctors were saying, this is it. You kind of like he's going to have full-time care right now, and that's the end of the story. Moose being Moose, of course, was far more resilient than that and sort of seemed to rebound for a period of time and then plateaued. Later on in the journey, things that you would associate with dementia became much more apparent. So, yeah, it was a classic tale of dementia.
And how did Moose understand deeply or well what was happening for him? And when did he start to kind of lose the understanding of that?
Yeah, well, I really hope he didn't. But I think there were times where he would say, I'm scared or I'm anxious or I'm worried. And he was becoming those sorts of behaviours that weren't, he was really struggling, I think. And he would often say, I'm really embarrassed because I'm stuttering or I can't remember, certain things. But I hope in a way he was somewhat oblivious to the insidious impacts that dementia can have.
So Moose was diagnosed when he was just 46. That is, the time and phase of our life when at the peak of our careers and our family lives as well. Were you actually a bit relieved when you did finally get a diagnosis and you could make sense of what was happening?
I wouldn't say I was relieved. I think it just set us on a path that was at times quite lonely and very confusing. And it was really only when we connected with Craig's neurologist, Professor Rowena Mobbs, who's incredible, and she was able to provide a little bit more of a guiding light through the confusion, and she was brilliant. So yes, I think dementia, because there's such a stigma attached to it, it's not often talked about. So
what were the sort of responses of people around you and what sort of support did you get? Because obviously they're treating him medically, but what about you?
And I can imagine too, Louise, you might have been the one to you're the one trying to educate all the other people, the friends and the family about what's happening.
Yeah. I think, you just sort of get on with it, right? You kind of, I have wonderful friends, obviously wonderful family support. And, it's, you do know who your friends are when you're going through moments of crisis, as they say. And of course, in this situation, we were very fortunate to have a small group, but a good group of friends who were incredibly understanding and empathetic. Moose as his behaviour started to shift, there were some really tricky moments where he would act out or behave inappropriately in the sense of, he would get angry or upset quite quickly over certain things, or he wouldn't turn up to things, or he just didn't want to, Moose just wanted to be Moose. So we just sort of kind of, you have to have an element of patience. You have to, an understanding. So
yes, absolutely.
Certainly character building.
Because I think it must be hard too when people who haven't seen him for a while sort of see him again and suddenly think, he's just not himself, or there's something not quite right. Did you encounter that a lot?
Yeah, there were a lot of people would say to me later on, I was out at the shopping centre or was at the pub or something and Moose just walked straight past me, and, I haven't seen him in a few years, but I thought he brushed me. I thought he was just not interested.
At one stage you talked about the idea that Moose was confabulating, and I've always associated that word with us 40-plus confabulous ladies. But what does that actually mean? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so we didn't, when I say we, Moose's closest friend Rocky and I, we'd often talk about this because it was one of his specialist doctors that said to us, he's confabulating, and we hadn't heard this turn of phrase before. Essentially what it means is that it's quite common in dementia, people who live with dementia, and they often make up stories. They believe a narrative that they think is true. In other words, I was at that football game, and yes, I did go and meet that person, and so it would continue. And initially we'd be scratching our heads going, you absolutely, you're making it up. Like, it's ridiculous. And you think it's coming from a place of malice or, trying to be deceptive, but that's not the case at all. It's just the way that the brain was trying to adapt. And I mean, again, once we sort of had a label or names for things, everything started to make much more sense than it did previously.
Yeah.
And so when that was happening, Louise, were the doctors giving you advice it's best just to ignore what he's saying, or it's best to go along with it, or it's best to try and correct him? Were you given that kind of advice?
Well, yes. I mean, you end up sort of going into that rabbit hole when you start doing a lot of research, and Dementia Australia has some brilliant resources available. I actually took up some supports through Dementia Australia where they offer, kind of an explainer about what and how people who live with dementia are handling their day-to-day. And it's quite interesting because there's certain things apart from confabulation, but for example, often if they see a dark space, they're terrified. It looks like a big black hole if they're walking along somewhere, or if they're wanting to sit in a chair. So it's really important to have different colours and spaces. They often get very sensitive to noise. Crowded places, of course, aren't very conducive to those environments at all. And I used to see that all the time. Moose would get incredibly terrified or frustrated, or he'd just get quite confused about being in a certain environment. But look, I mean, these are things that, are helpful because it's a long, difficult journey when that diagnosis kicks in because, those behaviours are really tricky to manage.
And I suppose every day it'd be different too, wouldn't it? I mean, some days, or, maybe he was better in the mornings and not so much at night, or I imagine just even for you, just adjusting to his different moods and characteristics would have been tricky.
Yeah, I think that they talk about routine a lot with dementia. It's really important to have that routine, and we certainly tried to stick to a fairly regular routine. Once we started to have carer support step in, which was sort of effectively from about 8 a.m. till 6, 7 p.m. at night every day. And that was really important to Moose because he used to love doing certain things like he loved going shopping. He loved going to the supermarket. He loved walking down the street and giving high fives to everybody. But after a while, things started to drop off. He started to become quite complacent, not wanting to shower. He didn't like the water sensation. He seemed to really get aggravated or agitated with those sorts of things. So eventually, after a while, things start to slip in a very gradual process. Once he could dress himself to the point where he could no longer do up his shoelaces. And he was always very proud of his appearance, even though he was Mr. Casual, but he loved picking out his outfits for the day. But eventually, after a while, he started to lose interest. And so it's interesting.
Yeah.
Because he loved the ocean too, didn't he? And was that continue to be part of his life when he had dementia?
Well, interestingly, again, gradual kind of lack of interest. And I remember once one of his last swims, he swam out to the Shark Boy at Bondi with a group of his pals, and he looked, and there was a photo taken. He looked absolutely terrified. He looked terrified. It looks like he was about to drown. And I thought, wow, this is a big shift because he was so fearless. I mean, he swam Alcatraz in San Francisco on his own.
Wow. Okay.
In Speedos and goggles. I mean, he had a support crew with him, but, that's like murky, cold water and it's a bit of a bucket list thing, I guess. But, he loved ocean, the water and swimming. But then I remember one of our last holidays, we went up to Noosa, and if those are familiar with Noosa, it's such a beautiful, peaceful beach, not a lot of surf. And I went in for a swim, and he would often follow me. He was terrified I was going to abandon him. Of course, I wasn't going to do that, but I remember going into the water to go for a swim, and he ran after me, and he got to the water's edge and absolutely had a meltdown. And I just thought, okay, this is, the mind playing tricks again. But he would have been not that 5 years ago. He'd be the one dragging me out, going, come on, let's go. So,
yeah. At what point did you kind of think, I don't think he can be at home anymore, that he needs a little bit of extra care and support? What happened? When did you reach that point?
Well, I never wanted to reach that point, and that was something that I tried to prevent from a long time. But it was Rowena who, one day we went to see her, and she made a decision for us, which I was somewhat grateful to her for saying that it was unsafe for him to be at home. He was by that stage becoming much more agitated and aggressive, and it wasn't safe anymore. I mean, he was leaving our apartment in the middle of the night, and I'd often wake up to hear the door sort of close, and I'd run out after him, and so it was not safe. It was not safe.
How long after the first diagnosis or the hip operation did you get to that point?
That was quite a while after the hip operation, because I think in hindsight, looking back, it was very much an early diagnosis. And so they say often with dementia, it's sort of by and large a decade, but everyone's different. Some dementias are much more aggressive than others, and pretty much, 10 years to the day of that diagnosis, Craig succumbed to dementia.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, gorgeous. You've said that a dementia tsunami is coming and that Australia is at its epicentre. What did you mean by that?
Well, right now there's over 400,000 people living with dementia, and there's around about 1.2 million carers who are supporting those living with dementia. And by, I think, 20 years from now, that number will double. So effectively, we are in the middle of a dementia tsunami, has a responsibility to lead in terms of dementia prevention and awareness. I guess there's over 40% of dementias that can be prevented or delayed. Unfortunately, Moose didn't have one of those dementias that could have been prevented, and many don't. However, I think what a lot of people aren't aware of is that there are, we should be talking about our brain health at an early age. We shouldn't be waiting until we're 65 plus to then have a conversation around, I might get dementia. It's just a normal part of aging. So I think we are part of the Asia Pacific region. We have a huge aging population, but we are quite an advanced country. So I think there's a lot we can do and lead from the front in terms of dementia awareness. I think we need to talk about it.
And you've set up an initiative called Think Again. And so is this what it's aiming to do? Why did you set it up?
Yes, I Think Again came about because I emailed our executive chairman and asked him if our organisation would consider supporting a national dementia advocacy campaign, because it occurred to me, and through conversations with Rowena Mobbs and other medical experts, we're just not talking about brain health, and we talk about heart health, we talk about cancer risks, but we don't seem to be talking enough about dementia. And the reason for that is there's such stigma around it. And during the course of the campaign, when it launched, the week that it launched, it was announced that dementia is now the leading cause of death in Australia.
That's right, yeah. It's time to talk about it.
It's time to talk about it. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So, Louise, I can see how you can actually keep your body healthy. I just can't see how you can keep your brain healthy, or is it just thinking a lot?
Well, actually, I mean, if you think, actually, a lot of what we do in terms of things to keep your heart healthy or your body healthy all relate to the brain. So it is, making sure that you're eating healthy, exercising, not smoking, drinking less. All of those things can really help prevent sort of cognitive decline. And of course, it's learning a new language. I remember going to a talk once, and one of our preeminent neuro scientists was explaining to the room that one of the best things that you can do is, how we drive to work, we always go the same pathway every day, or walk the same pathway every day. To change it up, go a different route. And that sort of, again, it's just the brain kind of teaching your brain new different of working. But look, I think some of it's really, really basic. It is a bit like the slip, slap, slap of brain health was my wonderful neuroscience professor, Henry Brodati, who leads the Centre for Healthy Brain Aging, talks about the slap of brain health. And that's exactly what we need. We need to start thinking about how to prevent and potentially delay dementia when there's no known cure yet, but that may change down the track.
So are these things that we can do? Like, I've heard that being social and making sure that you see people is an important part also of brain health as you get older, because you can get more and more isolated, I guess. But things like that, and I've heard that doing puzzles, all that kind of thing.
Puzzles, that's a good idea.
Is it actually proven that these things can, delay early dementia or help prevent it? Is that true? Or
I'm not a medical expert, so I'm probably not best to ask. But I do know that the Lancet Commission, which is the Lancet report, last year put out some very definitive findings that there are 14 modifiable behaviours that we can all adopt that are proven. But again, I being not a medical expert, but there is research available. Yeah, we do know that all is not lost, and I think that's when we think about dementia, we think it is an inevitable part of aging, or there's nothing you can do. But that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So for folks listening to this interview, if they wanted to check out what they can do for their brain health, what do they just pop it into the Google? How do I exercise my brain?
Yeah, there's actually a great, there's a CogD test that Neura offer, which is free. When we launched Think Again, we provided a link on our platform and it crashed within an hour because we had overuse. It's about 200,000 people tried to access it, and but it's been extraordinary. So you can jump on and you can do a test. It takes about 10 minutes, and it can check the level of your cognitive ability, and it's suggesting.
What's the URL there, Louise? Where should we go to make it crash again?
Yes, thinkagaindementia.com.au, and then there should be a CogD test on there, which takes you through to the Neuro, which is Neuro Research Australia.
Yeah. Neura. Yes.
Neura. You've mentioned Neura a few times. That's NEUR.
So they
are Research Australia,
medical research institute dedicated to improving the lives of people living with brain and nervous system disorders.
Based in Randwick, aren't they?
Yeah,
that's right. They're all part of the University of New South Wales, and CHIBA, which is the Centre for Healthy Brain Aging, is also a similar organisation. And Dementia Australia, which so there's some really great organisations that are available to help with answering any questions you might have.
Yeah.
Dementia Australia also have a brain track app, which you can, again, it's free to access. But if you go to Think Again, it will take you into a raft of different stories about dementia, plenty of insights from our leading medical institutes to explain about what we can do.
Do you think now there's less stigma around dementia than there used to be, say, 10 years ago when Craig was diagnosed?
I think the stigma's absolutely still there. I hope that this campaign will somehow change that eventually. But I think, unfortunately, people assume, with dementia and some of the behaviours, if you're walking down the street and you see somebody with dementia, you may not recognise that in fact they have dementia. You might think that they're intoxicated, or you might think that there's some weirdo got some problem. But I think the more people that understand, I remember going down to the shops constantly with Moose, and I'd always be stopping, saying, I'm really sorry, he's got dementia, because he would go up to people and, give them high fives and pat them on the back as if they were old friends. And it can be quite terrifying when you've got a 6'2" guy coming towards you.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Louise, how has the last decade changed you?
I think I've learnt so much about a disease that I didn't think I'd need to be really considering at all until later in life. I've learned how to, I guess, you become more patient, and that somewhere someone else is having a worse day than you, of course, but also, in a workplace environment, I know that everybody's carrying something. Everyone's got something that they're carrying, and I think that the one thing I've learned is just to be kind. I think you can't go wrong. Just be kind. Simple as that.
Isn't that a beautiful word?
Gorgeous. I'd just like to end on something that you actually said. It's a quote from you. I will never truly know the truth of his experience or the fear of him knowing what was happening to his diminishing brain, if he even knows at all. I am certain, though, that he knew that our love for each other is eternal. Isn't that beautiful? A testament to the power of the heart, even in the face of this unimaginable, gradual loss. We're talking to you at the beginning-ish of the year. So what does this year hold for you?
Look, I think that I'm really looking forward to continuing on Moose's legacy. I think there's a lot we can do. There's more work to be done in the dementia space. And, I'm very lucky that we've got some momentum, and I think we'll continue on with that for sure.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Well, gorgeous. We really, really appreciate you chatting to us, and it's been very emotional today. It's very raw, and we really totally get that.
Thank you.
But thank you for being so courageous, for shedding some light and reducing the stigma of this hugely important topic, and something that will probably affect all of us in some way or another
absolutely.
In our lives.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and would like to explore more, just visit thinkagaindementia.com.au. And I'd just like to end on a tribute that actually his great mate of 35 years, Rocky Ranallo, said in his tribute. He said, "I learned a lot from him. Mostly, be bold, be loud, be original, and always wear thongs." So thank you, Rocky, for that final word.
It's wonderful.
On Moose.
I will take that to heart.
Thank you, gorgeous.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for your company. What did you think of this episode?
Well, tell us everything, Gorgi, with a cheeky review on Apple Pods. We'd love to know what you reckon about our topics and our guests. And us.
And we look forward to your company next time on She Wasn't Born Yesterday.
Hope 103.2. Thanks for listening.